Kate Sullivan pulled her backpack straps tighter as she walked deeper into the Oregon forest. The thick trees blocked most of the sunlight, making everything feel cool and quiet. She liked it this way. The silence helped her think better than the busy streets back in town. 3 months had passed since Kate left the army. 3 months since the doctors told her she had something called PTSD. She did not like talking about it. The nightmares, the sudden loud noises that made her jump, the way crowds made her feel trapped. The forest was different. Here she could breathe. Kate had been walking for 2 hours on the unmarked trail. She knew these woods well from her childhood. Visits with her grandfather. Back then, she was just a curious kid who loved climbing trees and catching frogs. Now, at 32, she was a trained medic who had seen too much during her time in Afghanistan. The trees were the same, but she was different. A sharp, whining sound broke the forest silence. Kate stopped walking and listened carefully. There it was again, a soft, pained cry coming from somewhere to her left. Her military training kicked in automatically. She moved quietly toward the sound, stepping carefully to avoid breaking twigs. Under her boots, through a cluster of thick bushes, Kate saw him. A large dog with brown and black fur was limping badly. His back leg was bleeding, and red stains covered the fur on his side. The animal was trying to walk, but kept stumbling. Kate could see a deep cut on his hind leg that needed immediate attention. "Easy there, boy," Kate said softly, crouching down about 10 feet away from the injured animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog looked up at her with intelligent brown eyes. He was bigger than she first thought, probably a German shepherd mixed with something else. Despite his obvious pain, he did not growl or show his teeth. Instead, he watched her carefully, as if trying to decide whether she could be trusted. Kate slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out her first aid kit. She always carried medical supplies when hiking, old habits from her army days. "Let me help." "You okay? I know it hurts." She moved closer, one small step at a time. The dog stayed still, but his ears were up and alert. Kate had always been good with animals. During her deployment, she had helped patch up military dogs that worked with the soldiers. This felt familiar and comforting. "That's a pretty bad cut you have there," Kate said, now close enough to see the wound clearly. It was about 4 inches long and still bleeding. Someone or something had hurt this dog recently. "We need to clean this up before it gets infected." Kate opened her first aid kit and took out antiseptic wipes and bandages. The dog watched everything she did but did not try to move away. When she gently touched his injured leg, he whimpered, but stayed calm. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" Kate said, as she carefully cleaned the blood away from the wound. "This is going to sting a little, but it will help you feel better." As she worked, Kate noticed something strange. The dog kept looking in one direction, deeper into the forest. While she was treating his injury, his attention seemed focused on something she could not see. It was not the way a lost or scared animal usually acted. Kate finished wrapping the bandage around the dog's leg. "There you go. That should hold until we can get you to a vet." She sat back on her heels and studied the animal. "Now where did you come from? And where is your owner?" The dog stood up carefully, testing his weight on the injured leg. The bandage held well, and he seemed to walk a little easier. But instead of following Kate toward the main trail, he started limping in the opposite direction. After a few steps, he stopped and looked back at her. Kate frowned. "That's not the way out, boy. The parking area is back that way." She pointed toward the trail she had been following. The dog whined softly and took a few more steps away from the main trail. Then he stopped again and looked back at Kate with those same intelligent eyes. It was almost like he was trying to tell her something important. "You want me to follow you?" Kate asked. She felt a little silly talking to a dog like he could answer, but something about his behavior seemed very purposeful. "I don't think that's a good idea. You're hurt, and it's getting late." The dog limped a few more steps, then sat down and looked at her again. This time Kate noticed something she had missed before. Around his neck was a collar, but it was not a regular pet collar. It looked more like the kind working dogs wore, search and rescue dogs or police dogs. Kate looked at her watch. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. She had plenty of daylight left, but she had planned to be heading back by now. Her truck was parked about 2 miles behind her on the main trail. The smart thing to do would be to carry the injured dog back to her vehicle and drive him to the nearest animal hospital. But the dog's behavior bothered her. He was not acting like a lost pet. He was acting like he had a job to do, like he needed to get somewhere important and wanted her help to do it. Kate made a decision that went against her better judgment. "Okay, boy, I'll follow you for a little while. But if we don't find anything in an hour, we're turning around." The dog seemed to understand. He stood up immediately and began limping along a barely visible path that Kate had not noticed before. Old-growth trees pressed in on both sides and thick moss covered the ground. This was not a trail that many people used. As they walked deeper into the forest, Kate wondered what she was getting herself into. The dog moved with determination despite his injury, stopping occasionally to make sure she was still following. Every few minutes he would pause and sniff the air, then continue forward with renewed purpose. Kate had learned to trust her instincts during her time in the military. Right now, those instincts were telling her that this was no ordinary lost dog. Something was driving him forward, something important enough that he ignored his pain to keep moving. The afternoon sun filtered through the thick canopy above them, creating patches of light and shadow on the forest floor. Kate followed the injured dog deeper into the wilderness, having no idea that she was about to stumble into a mystery that would change everything. The path the dog chose was not really a path at all. Kate had to push through low-hanging branches and step over fallen logs that blocked their way. Thorny bushes caught on her jacket sleeves, and spiderwebs stretched across the narrow spaces between trees. She was glad she had worn her sturdy hiking boots and long pants. The injured dog moved ahead of her with surprising skill. Even with his hurt leg, he knew exactly where to step and which way to turn. Kate noticed he would pause at certain spots, like he was remembering landmarks. A large boulder shaped like a turtle, a dead tree with 3 main branches, small, stream that bubbled over smooth rocks. "You've been this way before, haven't you, boy?" Kate said as she helped him across the stream. The dog looked up at her and wagged his tail once, then kept moving forward. Kate checked her watch. They had been walking for almost an hour. The sun was getting lower in the sky and the forest was becoming darker. She was starting to feel worried about finding their way back before nightfall. But every time she thought about turning around, the dog would look back at her with those intelligent brown eyes, and she would keep following. The terrain was getting harder to navigate. They climbed over rocky areas where Kate had to use her hands to pull herself up. The dog struggled with these parts because of his injured leg, so Kate helped him when she could. She lifted him over the biggest rocks and supported him when the ground was too steep. During one of these difficult climbs, Kate noticed something that made her stop. The dog was breathing hard, but he was not panting randomly like most dogs would. He was sniffing the air in a very specific way. His nose pointed in different directions, and his ears moved like he was listening for something she could not hear. "Is it, boy? What are you looking for?" Kate asked quietly. The dog tilted his head and looked at her, then continued sniffing. After a moment, he seemed to find what he was searching for. His tail wagged slightly, and he moved forward with renewed energy despite his injury. Kate followed. But she was becoming more curious about this animal. Most lost dogs would be trying to find their way home, or looking for food and water. This dog was clearly on a mission. He moved like the military dogs she had worked with overseas, focused, determined, like he had been trained for a specific job. They walked for another 30 minutes through increasingly thick forest. Kate had to use her flashlight even though it was still afternoon because the trees blocked out most of the sunlight. The air felt cooler and smelled different, more like pine and moss and old wood. The dog stopped suddenly at the edge of a small clearing. Kate came up beside him and saw what had made him pause. There was a cabin ahead of them, tucked back against a rocky cliff face. It looked old and abandoned, with moss growing on the roof and vines climbing up the log walls. "Is that where you were trying to take me?" Kate asked the dog. The dog looked up at her, then limped directly toward the cabin. He walked straight to the front door and began scratching at it with his good front paw. His scratching was not random or playful. It was urgent, like he was trying to get someone's attention. Kate approached the cabin carefully, her military training made her cautious about unknown buildings, especially ones that seemed empty. She walked around the outside first, looking for signs of recent activity. The windows were covered with thick curtains, so she could not see inside. No smoke came from the chimney. No sounds came from within. But as she walked around the cabin, Kate noticed things that did not match the abandoned appearance. The front steps, while covered with leaves, were solid and had not rotted. The door looked weathered, but was still in good condition. Someone had taken care of this place, even if they were not here right now. The dog continued scratching at the front door, becoming more agitated. He would scratch, then look back at Kate, then scratch again. It was clear he wanted to get inside. Kate tried the door handle, locked. She looked around for an obvious place where someone might hide a key. Under the doormat, which was just a piece of old carpet, nothing there. A flower pot by the steps. It's empty except for dead plants. The dog had stopped scratching and was now sniffing around the base of the front porch. Kate watched him work his way from one end to the other, his nose close to the ground. When he reached the far corner, he sat down and looked at her. Kate walked over to where the dog was sitting. She knelt down and felt around the wooden floorboards of the porch. One of them was loose. When she lifted it up, she found a small metal box underneath. Inside the box was a single key. "Good boy," Kate said to the dog. "You really do know this place, don't you?" The key fit the front door lock perfectly. Kate turned it slowly and heard the mechanism click open. She pushed the door open just a crack and listened carefully. No sounds came from inside. No movement. The cabin felt empty. Kate opened the door wider and stepped inside, with the dog limping close behind her. The inside of the cabin was much cleaner than she had expected. Dust covered most surfaces, but the furniture was arranged neatly, and everything seemed to be in its proper place. A small kitchen area filled one corner. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A comfortable-looking chair sat near a window. But what caught Kate's attention immediately was the far wall of the cabin. It was covered with papers, maps, photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes were pinned up everywhere. Red string connected different pieces of information, creating a web of connections that covered the entire wall. The dog walked directly to a rocking chair near the covered wall and lay down beside it, like this was his usual spot. On the small table next to the chair was an open notebook, a pair of reading glasses, and a coffee mug with cold coffee still in it. Kate moved closer to examine the wall of information. In the center of everything was a large photograph of a young girl with dark hair and a bright smile. She looked to be about 12 years old. Under the photo was a name written in black marker, Lucy Martinez. Around Lucy's photo were police reports, search and rescue documents, and newspaper articles. All of them were about her disappearance 6 months ago during a family camping trip. Kate read the headlines quickly. Girl missing after camping trip. Search called off after 3 weeks. Family still hopes for missing daughter's return. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She was standing in someone's private investigation room. Someone who had not given up looking for Lucy Martinez when everyone else had stopped searching. Dog whined softly from his spot beside the rocking chair. Kate looked at him and suddenly understood. This was not just any dog. This was a search dog. And he had brought her here because his owner was missing too. Kate walked slowly around the cabin, studying everything on the investigation wall. The person who lived here had spent months collecting information about Lucy Martinez. There were maps of the area where she disappeared, copies of police interviews with her family, and photos of the search teams that had looked for her. The dog watched Kate from his spot beside the rocking chair. He seemed calmer now that they were inside the cabin, but his eyes followed her every movement. Kate noticed a water bowl and food dish near the kitchen area. Both were empty, but they looked like they had been used recently. On the small table next to the rocking chair, Kate picked up the open notebook. The handwriting was neat but shaky, like it belonged to an older person. The first page had a name, written at the top, Henry Morrison. Below that was a phone number and an address in town. Kate flipped through the pages and began to understand what had happened here. Henry Morrison was Lucy Martinez's grandfather, not her blood grandfather, but the grandfather of her best friend. According to his notes, Lucy had been staying with Henry's family during the camping trip when she disappeared. The notebook told a sad story. Henry blamed himself for what happened to Lucy. He had been the adult in charge when she vanished from their campsite. The police had questioned him for hours, and some people in town whispered that maybe he knew more than he was telling. Henry wrote about how these accusations hurt him deeply. After the official search was called off, Henry decided to keep looking on his own. He knew these mountains better than anyone. He had worked as a forest ranger for 40 years before retiring. If Lucy was still out there, he was going to find her. Kate read about Henry's search methods. He would take his dog Scout into different areas of the forest, looking for any sign that Lucy had been there. They searched old hunting cabins, abandoned mine shafts, and remote campsites. Henry mapped every place they went and wrote down every small clue they found. The most recent entries in the notebook were from just 1 week ago. Henry had written about finding something important. He had discovered fresh tire tracks in an area where no vehicles should have been. The tracks led to an old mining complex about 5 miles north of the cabin. Kate felt her heart beating faster as she read Henry's final entries. He had seen lights in the mining buildings at night. He had heard generators running. Someone was using those old buildings for something, and Henry suspected it might be connected to Lucy's disappearance. The last entry was dated exactly 1 week ago. Henry wrote that he was taking Scout to investigate the mining complex more closely. Planned to watch the buildings from a distance and see if he could learn more about who was there. But he also wrote something that made Kate's blood run cold. If something happens to me, Scout knows the way back to this cabin. He can lead others to continue the search. Lucy is still alive. I can feel it. Someone has her, and they are keeping her at the mining complex. I have to try to help her, even if it means putting myself in danger. Kate closed the notebook and looked at Scout. The dog was watching her with those intelligent brown eyes. And now she understood everything. Henry Morrison was missing or dead. Scout had been injured during their last mission to the mining complex. The dog had somehow made it back to the forest where Kate found him, and he had led her here to continue Henry's search for Lucy. Kate walked over to the investigation wall and studied the maps more carefully. Henry had marked several locations with red X marks. Some were places he had already searched. Others were places he planned to check. The mining complex was circled in thick red marker, with the words most likely written beside it. Scout got up from his spot beside the chair and walked to the back door of the cabin. He whined softly and scratched at the door, just like he had done at the front door. Kate followed him and looked out the back window. What she saw made her stomach drop. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt behind the cabin. Someone with a vehicle had been here recently, probably within the last day or two. The tracks were deep and clear, made by large tires like the kind on a truck or SUV. Kate felt a surge of fear. Someone else knew about Henry's cabin and his investigation. They might not be friendly. They might be the same people who had taken Lucy, and if they knew Henry had been getting close to finding her, they might have done something to stop him. Scout continued whining at the back door, but now his behavior seemed different. Instead of wanting to go outside, he seemed nervous about something out there. His ears were back, and the fur on his neck was standing up slightly. Kate moved away from the window and tried to think clearly. She needed to make some decisions quickly. It would be dark in a few hours, and she was miles away from her truck. She could try to hike back to the main trail in the dark, but that would be dangerous and would mean abandoning Henry's search for Lucy, or she could stay in the cabin overnight and try to continue Henry's investigation in the morning. But if the people who had left those tire tracks came back, she could be in serious trouble. Kate looked at Scout again. The dog had stopped whining and was now sitting very still, listening to something she could not hear. His entire body was tense and alert. Then Kate heard it too. The distant sound of a vehicle engine getting closer. She quickly grabbed Henry's notebook and stuffed it into her backpack. She also took one of the maps that showed the location of the mining complex. If she had to run, at least she would have. The information Henry had died trying to gather. The engine sound was getting louder. Scout moved away from the back door and came to stand beside Kate. She could feel him trembling slightly, but he was not trying to hide. He was ready to protect her if necessary. Kate looked around the cabin for another way out. The front door would put her in plain sight of whoever was approaching. The back door led toward the vehicle sounds, but there was a small window on the side wall that faced toward the cliff. The window was just big enough for her to squeeze through if she had to. Kate unlocked it and pushed it open slightly, just in case. She motioned for Scout to follow her, and they moved to the side of the cabin where they would be harder to see. The vehicle sounds stopped. Car doors slammed shut. Kate heard voices, but she could not make out the words. At least 2 people, maybe more. They were walking toward the cabin. Kate held her breath and waited, hoping that whoever these people were, they would not stay long. But deep in her heart, she knew this was just the beginning of something much more dangerous than she had expected. Kate pressed herself against the cabin wall and listened carefully. The voices outside were getting closer. She could hear heavy footsteps on the wooden porch and the sound of the front door being tried. Someone was shaking the handle roughly. "Locked," a man's voice said. "But I know the old man kept a spare key somewhere around here." "Find it fast," another voice replied. This one sounded younger and more impatient. "We need to clean this place out before anyone else shows up." Kate felt her heart pounding. These people knew about Henry and his cabin. They were not here by accident. Scout stayed close beside her, and she could feel his muscles tense and ready. The dog knew these were dangerous people. The sound of wood splintering came from the front of the cabin. Someone had kicked in the door instead of looking for the key. Kate heard heavy boots walking around inside, moving furniture and opening drawers. "Look at all this stuff on the wall," the first voice said. The old man really was getting close to finding her. "Boss is not going to like this," the second voice replied. "Morrison knew way too much. Good thing we took care of him when we did." Kate felt sick to her stomach. These men were talking about Henry like he was dead. They had killed him because he was getting too close to finding Lucy, and now they were here to destroy his investigation and cover up their tracks. "Grab all the papers and maps," the first man ordered. "Burn everything. You cannot leave any evidence that the old man figured out where we have the girl." Kate knew she had to do something. If these men destroyed Henry's research, no one would ever know what happened to Lucy. But she was outnumbered and had no weapons except the small knife on her belt. She needed to get away and find help. She looked at Scout and put her finger to her lips, hoping the dog would understand to stay quiet. Then she carefully pushed the side window open wider and climbed through. Scout followed her, moving silently despite his injured leg. Once outside, Kate crouched low and moved toward the forest. She needed to get far enough away to use her cell phone safely. But as she reached the edge of the trees, she heard more voices coming from a different direction. "Check the back of the cabin, too," someone shouted. "Make sure nobody else is around." Kate realized there were more than 2 men. They had surrounded the cabin and were being very thorough. She and Scout were trapped between the cabin and whoever was searching the back area. The only way out was up the rocky cliff face behind the cabin. Kate had done some rock climbing during her military training, but never with an injured dog. She looked at Scout and made a decision. She could not leave him behind. Kate picked up the 60-pound dog as carefully as she could and started climbing. Scout did not struggle or make noise. It was like he understood they were in serious danger and needed to work together. The climb was harder than Kate expected. The rocks were loose in some places, and she had to find secure handholds while carrying. Scout, her arms burned from the effort and sweat dripped into her eyes. But she kept climbing, one careful step at a time. When they reached a small ledge about 30 feet up, Kate stopped to rest. From here she could see down into the cabin through the windows. 3 men in dark clothing were inside, pulling papers off the investigation wall and stuffing them into large bags. Kate took out her cell's phone and checked for signal. Nothing. She was too deep in the mountains to get any reception. But she could see the men clearly now. She tried to memorize their faces and what they were wearing. One of the men was tall and thin with gray hair. He seemed to be in charge, giving orders to the others. The second man was younger and muscular, with a tattoo on his neck. The third was older and moved with a limp, like he had been injured recently. "Did you find Morrison's notebook?" the gray-haired man asked. "No," the muscular man replied. "It's not here. Maybe he had it with him when "We caught him. Does not matter now," the leader said. "Without the maps and research, nobody will know where to look for the girl. We can move her to a different location next week, just to be safe." Kate felt a surge of hope. They were talking about Lucy like she was still alive. If Kate could find the mining complex Henry had written about, she might be able to rescue her. The men continued searching the cabin for another 20 minutes, taking everything they could find. Kate watched them load boxes of papers into their truck. They were destroying months of Henry's careful investigation. Finally, the men prepared to leave. But before they got in their truck, the leader made a phone call. Kate could not hear everything. He said, but she caught a few important words. "Morrison is taken care of," he said into the phone. "We cleared out his cabin. Nobody will connect him to our operation now." There was a pause while he listened to whoever was on the other end. "Yes, the girl is secure at the mining site," he continued. "We can hold her there for another week. Then move her to the buyers down south." Kate felt sick again. These men were not just kidnappers. They were selling children to other criminals. Lucy was not their only victim. After the truck drove away, Kate and Scout waited on the ledge for another hour to make sure the men were really gone. Then they carefully climbed down to the cabin. Inside, the place was destroyed. The investigation wall was bare, except for a few torn pieces of paper. Furniture was overturned, and drawers were emptied onto the floor. The men had been very thorough, but Kate found something they had missed. Behind the rocking chair, a single piece of paper had fallen and gotten stuck between the wall and the chair leg. It was a hand-drawn map showing the route from the cabin to the mining complex. Kate studied the map carefully. The mining complex was about 5 miles north, just like Henry had written in his notebook. The map showed several buildings and marked which ones had been active recently. Most importantly, it showed a safe approach route that would allow someone to get close without being seen. Kate looked at Scout, who was watching her intently. The dog's injury was healing well, and he seemed ready for another mission. "Your owner was a brave man," Kate told Scout quietly. "He died trying to save Lucy. Now it's up to us to finish what he started." Scout wagged his tail once and walked to the door. He was ready to go to the mining complex and complete Henry's mission. Kate folded the map carefully and put it in her pocket. Tomorrow, when the sun came up, they would head north to find Lucy Martinez. Kate woke up before sunrise in the destroyed cabin. She had spent the night on the floor with Scout curled up beside her, both of them staying alert for any sounds of the men returning. Her military training had taught her to sleep lightly when in danger, and she had woken several times during the night to listen for approaching vehicles. Scout seemed to understand that. Today was important. He stood by the door, his injured leg much better after a night of rest. The bandage Kate had applied was holding well, and the dog moved with purpose and determination. Kate studied Henry's hand-drawn map one more time. The mining complex was 5 miles north through difficult terrain. According to the map, there were 4 main buildings and several smaller structures. Henry had marked 2 buildings with red X marks, meaning those were the ones showing recent activity. Before leaving the cabin, Kate wrote a note on a piece of paper she found on the floor. She explained everything she had discovered about Henry Morrison, Lucy Martinez, and the men who had killed Henry. She left the note on the kitchen table where someone would find it if she did not return. Kate also found an old, battery-powered radio in one of the cabin's closets. The radio was heavy and the batteries were weak, but it still worked. She put it in her backpack, along with extra water and the remaining medical supplies. The hike to the mining complex took 3 hours. Scout led the way, following scent trails that Kate could not detect. The dog knew exactly where they were going, probably because he had made this trip with Henry just 1 week earlier. As they got closer to their destination, Kate became more careful about making noise. She had learned stealth techniques in the army, and she used them now to move quietly through the forest. Scout seemed to understand the need for silence and placed his paws carefully to avoid stepping on twigs or leaves. When they reached the ridge overlooking the mining complex, Kate took out a small pair of binoculars from her backpack. Below them, she could see the buildings Henry had marked on his map. Two of them showed clear signs of recent use. Generators hummed quietly, and electrical wires ran between the structures. Kate watched the complex for 30 minutes, counting the people she could see. Two men walked around the outside of the buildings, and they both carried guns. These were guards making sure no one got close to whatever was happening inside. Through the windows of the largest building, Kate saw movement. Someone was inside, but she could not tell who it was from this distance. She needed to get closer to confirm that Lucy was really there. Using the cover of trees and old mining equipment, Kate worked her way down the hillside. Scout followed her, moving like the trained search dog he was. They reached a position about 50 yards from the main building without being detected. From this closer position, Kate could see through a window on the side of the building. Her heart jumped when she saw a young girl sitting on a cot inside. The girl had dark hair and looked to be about 12 years old. It was Lucy Martinez. Lucy looked tired and scared, but she appeared to be unharmed. Kate could see that her hands were not tied, but the windows had bars on them. The girl was definitely being held prisoner, but her captors were keeping her alive and relatively comfortable. Kate knew she could not rescue Lucy by herself. There were at least 2 armed guards, and probably more people inside the buildings. She needed help from law enforcement, but first she had to find a way to contact them. Kate moved back up the hillside to a position where she hoped the radio might work better. She turned it on and tried different frequencies, looking for any signal that might connect her to park rangers or police. After several tries, she heard a voice through the static. "Forest Service Station 12. This is Ranger Collins. Is anyone there?" Kate grabbed the radio microphone. "Ranger Collins, this is Kate Sullivan. I am a former Army medic, and I have an emergency situation at the old Copper Creek mining complex. I have located missing child Lucy Martinez, and she is being held by armed criminals." There was a pause. Then the ranger's voice came back stronger. "Can you repeat that, ma'am? Did you say Lucy Martinez?" As Kate replied.
"Oh."
"The girl who disappeared 6 months ago during a camping trip. She is alive and being held at the Copper Creek mining complex. I need immediate backup from law enforcement. Ma'am, I need you to give me your exact location and describe what you can see." Kate gave the ranger detailed information about the mining complex, the number of guards she had observed, and the building where Lucy was being held. She also told him about Henry Morrison's murder and the men who had destroyed his cabin. "We are sending units to your location immediately," Ranger Collins said. "Can you maintain visual contact with the suspects until we arrive?" "Yes," Kate answered. "But I think they might be planning to move the girl soon. The men at the cabin said something about moving her next week." "Understood. Stay hidden, and do not attempt a rescue on your own. Help is on the way." Kate turned off the radio to save the batteries and returned to her observation position. Scout stayed close beside her, watching the buildings below. The dog seemed to understand that they were waiting for something important to happen. 20 minutes later, Kate heard the distant sound of helicopters approaching. The guards at the mining complex heard them too and began running around in panic. Kate watched as they tried to start vehicles and gather equipment, but the law enforcement response was faster and better organized than the criminals expected. Police helicopters surrounded the complex while ground units blocked all the escape routes. Within minutes, the entire area was secured. Kate watched through her binoculars as officers entered the building where Lucy was being held. A few minutes later, she saw them carrying the girl out safely. Lucy was walking on her own and appeared to be in good condition. Scout barked once, a sound of satisfaction and completion. His mission was finally over. After the arrests were completed, Kate and Scout walked down to meet the officers. Lucy Martinez was reunited with her family that same day, and the criminal operation was shut down permanently. The investigation revealed that the men had been trafficking children for over 2 years, and Lucy's rescue led to saving several other victims. Kate learned that Henry Morrison had died of a heart attack during his final scouting mission. Probably from the stress of discovering the criminal operation, his careful investigation and Scout's loyalty had made the rescue possible. In the months that followed, Kate found new purpose working with search and rescue teams. Scout became her permanent partner, and together, they helped find other missing people. Kate's PTSD symptoms became more manageable as she focused on helping others instead of dwelling on her own painful memories. Henry Morrison was honored as a hero who had given his life to save a child. His story inspired other people to never give up hope when someone they loved went missing. And Scout became famous as the dog who led a stranger through the wilderness to complete his owner's final mission.